A woman trapped beneath the ice, drowning in secrets no one dared to hear. A lone patrol car on a snow-laced road, and a German shepherd who refused to look away. No backup, no second chances. Just a heartbeat, a splash, and a bond forged in frost. He wasn't supposed to find her. She wasn't supposed to survive. But when Officer Caleb Dawson and his K-9 partner, Ghost, pulled her from that frozen lake, they uncovered something deeper than water. A conspiracy buried beneath silence, and a woman the world left for dead. What Ghost did next wasn't just heroic. It was something only the loyal heart of a dog could do. This is the story of intelligence, loyalty, and the love that heals what justice alone cannot. It will leave you breathless and believing in second chances again. Before we begin, tap that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and hit the bell icon, so you never miss a story where hope still walks on four paws. The wind swept low and hard through the frozen pines of Northwood, a quiet mountain town tucked into the northern spine of Colorado. It was late January, and the air had long since turned bitter, biting into skin with the ruthlessness only winter could afford. Mirror Lake, once a serene sheet of glass in summer, was now a pale frozen stretch beneath the moonlight, crusted with snow and silence. Officer Caleb Dawson, 29, rolled down the driver's side window of his patrol SUV, letting the icy air sting his face. He wasn't a man of many words, tall, lean, with broad shoulders wrapped in the padded fabric of his department-issued jacket. His hair was dark brown, usually trimmed short with military precision, though tonight a few strands peeked beneath his beanie. The scar along his jawline earned during a hostage standoff 2 years prior was almost faded now, but it carried weight in every glance he exchanged with the townspeople. Caleb was known for his composure and fairness, respected more for his silences than his speeches. Those who knew him well, though few, understood that his calm wasn't nature, it was legacy. He was the youngest son of Deputy Mark Dawson, who had died in a gas station shootout when Caleb was 13. That night had taught him one thing. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a siren. It comes with quiet decisions in the dark. Beside him sat Ghost, his K-9 partner. A 6-year-old male German shepherd, Ghost was a study in control and focus. His coat was a sleek blend of black and rich mahogany brown, and his golden eyes gleamed with uncanny intelligence. At 85 pounds, his form was muscular but precise, built for agility. Ghost had been partnered with Caleb for nearly 3 years, now trained initially with Caleb's older brother, Noah, who had been killed in the line of duty overseas during a joint military police operation in Germany. Since then, Ghost had refused to work with any handler until Caleb. The bond between them wasn't just protocol. It was blood and memory, carried in the way Ghost never barked, but always understood. He didn't just follow commands, he anticipated them. And when things turned wrong, he never hesitated. They were nearing the northern bend of the lake, one of the most isolated sections, when Caleb noticed something. A faint glint of broken pine, the disturbed outline of tire tracks where snow should have settled undisturbed. "Ghost," he murmured. Ghost's ears perked instantly. A low growl formed in his throat, not aggressive but alert. Caleb slowed the cruiser and stepped out. The snow crunched beneath his boots. It was just after 11:30 p.m., and the temperature had dropped to 9 degrees Celsius. The stars were muffled beneath overcast haze, and the lake was half swallowed in shadow. Ghost leapt down from the SUV and began to pace near the water's edge, nose to the ground, tail stiff and pointed like a flag. Then suddenly he darted forward, barking sharply, a rare thing from him. That's when Caleb saw it, just beneath the pale shimmer of ice headlights, glowing like dying stars beneath the surface. "Damn it!" Caleb hissed, sprinting forward. The lake groaned underfoot. The SUV beneath the ice was nose down, barely visible through the fog and fractured ice. Caleb ripped off his parka, tossed his radio to the bank, and without a second thought, dove in. The cold was a knife to the lungs. The world blurred into blue and white as he swam down, fingers stiff and useless. The vehicle was still sinking, front wheels lodged into the lake bed. Inside, slumped against the steering wheel, was a woman unmoving. Her hair pale blonde and long floated around her like seaweed. No bubbles, no movement, just stillness. He yanked at the door. It resisted. Another pull. His fingers bled against the metal. Then it gave. He reached inside, numb hands fumbling for the seatbelt. It clicked free. He pulled her against him, her body soft, limp, far too cold and kicked upward. The weight nearly dragged him down again, but the ice had thinned from impact. He broke through the surface with a gasp, choking on the night air. "Come on," he rasped, dragging her to the shore, every limb trembling. He collapsed beside her on the frozen gravel ramp, cradling her head, starting compressions. "Breathe, damn it. Breathe." She didn't move. Ghost hovered nearby, tail low, pacing in sharp, small circles. Then, as if by instinct, Ghost let out a single bark-pointed and loud-snapping Caleb from panic into rhythm. Another round. Then another. The woman suddenly gasped, coughed. Water spewed from her lips like broken glass. She wheezed, eyes wide and wild before going limp again. Caleb exhaled and pulled her closer, wrapping his jacket around her. "Got you. You're safe," he whispered. As he reached to lift her, Ghost barked sharply behind him. Caleb looked back. The ice near the car was cracking, a second collapse imminent. Caleb turned to go back for his flashlight still near the hole in the ice. Ghost leapt, grabbing the hem of Caleb's coat in his teeth, yanking him away from the weakening shore just before the second sheet collapsed into the black water. Caleb stumbled back, breath frozen in his lungs. "You." He looked at Ghost, realization dawning. "You just saved my life." Ghost gave a short, knowing snort, then nuzzled the woman's face once before stepping aside. Caleb radioed in backup. EMTs would take at least 15 minutes in this weather. He adjusted the jacket tighter around the woman's frame and pressed 2 fingers gently to her neck. Steady. Barely, but there. Behind him, the lake went quiet again. But Caleb knew the night had changed. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of something far deeper. The early morning wind snaked between the pine trees of Northwood, drawing long, icy fingers across the fogged windows of the town's modest sheriff's substation. Snow flurried gently now, less a storm than a whisper, but the cold seeped into everything. Inside the station's spare medical room, heat hummed low from an old radiator, and a kettle hissed faintly in the corner, sending steam toward the cracked ceiling tiles. Caleb Dawson stood at the foot of the cot, arms crossed, uniform still damp in patches from the lake. His dark eyes remained fixed on the woman now lying under 2 wool blankets, her breathing slow but steady. She'd been out for hours. The paramedics had checked her vitals and left no ID, no phone, no wallet. Just her and the soaking wet remnants of a black winter coat now folded over the back of a nearby chair. Ghost sat silently near the cot's edge, his ears slightly perked, eyes watching her intently. That in itself was strange. Ghost didn't linger like this. He was a dog of precision and task, not sentiment. Yet now he sat unmoving, his large frame still, his body a quiet guard at her bedside. Caleb took a slow breath. "You recognize her?" he asked softly, eyes flicking toward Ghost. The shepherd didn't move, didn't respond, but there was something in the way his tail flicked, barely perceptible, as if something in her presence stirred memory. The woman stirred. She groaned softly, head shifting against the thin pillow. Then, with a sharp inhale, she sat bolt upright, eyes wide and glassy. Ghost stood instantly but made no sound. "Easy," Caleb said, lifting his palms. "You're safe." "You were in an accident." Her eyes darted around the room, then landed on Caleb, then Ghost. She blinked hard, as if trying to focus. Her voice came out raw, like gravel on glass. Where am I? Northwood Sheriff's Substation. I'm Officer Dawson. You were found under the ice at Mirror Lake. She looked down at herself. I don't remember. Then, after a moment, my name is Amelia. Amelia Grant. Her eyes locked onto Caleb's, and something shifted in her voice, controlled but still hesitant. That's all I can tell you. It wasn't fear in her expression, at least, not in the usual sense. It was a calculated caution. Caleb had seen it in witnesses who'd gone through something unspoken, the kind of trauma that lived behind the ribs and between the silences. But it was Ghost who reacted in a way that unsettled Caleb most. The dog lowered his head slowly, stepped forward, and rested his chin on the edge of the cot, eyes locked with hers. Amelia's lips trembled. He's not usually like this, Caleb said. He doesn't do gentle unless he wants to. She reached a trembling hand toward Ghost. He didn't flinch. She touched the fur between his ears, hesitantly, then more firmly. You pulled me out? She whispered. Caleb shook his head. I did. He led me to you. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the station's wall clock. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, pulling her hand back. I can't tell you anything more. Not yet. Caleb didn't press. Instead, he turned, walked across the room, and opened the drawer of a wooden cabinet. Inside was a small cedar box weathered with a brass latch that bore the Dawson family crest. He brought it over, sitting on the bench beside the radiator. Ghost followed with his eyes, still near the cot. Caleb clicked open the box. Inside, neatly folded in black velvet, was a silver K-9 service badge. The name inscribed, Sergeant Noah Dawson. Alongside it lay a photo, Noah with Ghost, younger and leaner, smiling wide in his marine blues. It was taken 6 months before his death in Munich. He was Ghost's first partner, Caleb said quietly. My brother. Ghost didn't let anyone near him after Noah died. Until me. He didn't know why he was telling her this. She was a stranger, cautious, secretive. But something about her presence. The way Ghost had immediately accepted her, the strange sadness in her eyes, felt tethered. Amelia's gaze dropped to the photo. He looks kind, she said. He was brave, too, the kind of person who believed everyone deserved the truth, even if it hurt. She looked at him again. You're a lot like him. I'm not sure about that, Caleb said, shutting the box gently. But Ghost knows things I don't. He sees people clearer. Ghost let out a low huff, almost in agreement. A knock sounded on the station's side door. Caleb stood. Stay here, I'll be right back. He stepped into the narrow hallway and opened the side entrance. Deputy Sarah Lynn stood on the steps, stomping snow off her boots. A woman in her late 30s, Sarah was stocky and sharp-eyed, with a reputation for reading people like a worn book. She'd been a sheriff in Denver before requesting a transfer to Northwood after losing her partner in an ambush gone wrong. Since then, she preferred small towns, quieter nights, and straightforward problems. Mostly. Morning, she said gruffly, holding out a thermos. Heard you pulled someone out of the lake. Caleb nodded. No ID. She says her name's Amelia Grant. That's all. Sarah narrowed her eyes. And Ghost? He's glued to her like she's family. That made Sarah pause. Strange. Caleb took the thermos. She's hiding something. They always are, Sarah replied. But sometimes they're hiding from the same people we're chasing. She adjusted her scarf. I'll file a quiet missing persons check under that name. No press, no broadcast yet. Thanks. When Caleb returned to the room, Amelia was sitting up fully, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Ghost was now lying beside the cot like a statue, eyes half closed, but alert. I should go, she said softly. "You're not going anywhere until I know you're not in danger," Caleb answered, "or bringing danger to my town." Amelia didn't argue, but the way her shoulders tightened, the way her fingers gripped the blanket, it told him she wasn't used to help and didn't know how to accept it. Ghost stirred, stretched out a paw, and nudged her knee once before lying back down. It was a moment of strange grace, and Caleb, watching from the corner, knew with a certainty that this wasn't over. Whatever story Amelia carried, it hadn't even begun yet. The snow had settled thick over Northwood by mid-morning, muffling sound and movement like a heavy white blanket. Sunlight fractured through the frost-dusted windowpanes of the sheriff's station, illuminating the modest garage bay attached to the building, a repurposed storage space now used as a vehicle impound and field equipment staging area. The air smelled faintly of gasoline, rubber, and coffee, an oddly comforting mix in Caleb Dawson's world. He stood just inside the open bay door, arms crossed over his chest, watching as Ghost circled the ice-caked SUV that had been hauled from Mirror Lake just hours earlier. The vehicle Amelia Grant's presumed car was now thawing under a set of space heaters. Its black frame was dented at the front grille, windshield spiderwebbed with cracks, and the passenger side mirror hung by a single wire. But it was something subtler that had drawn Caleb's attention. A long, shallow gouge along the rear left door panel, like something had scraped it intentionally, not during a crash. Ghost paused, nose twitching. The shepherd sniffed once, twice, then tilted his head slightly. With a low, focused grunt, he stepped back, placed one paw on the running board, and began to paw gently at the rear passenger seat. Caleb moved in. "You smell something, boy." Ghost let out a low bark, not panicked, not playful. Confirming. Caleb opened the door. The interior was soaked and still half frozen. He peeled back the seat cushion and reached into the shallow space beneath. His gloved hand brushed against something not metallic but plastic. He pulled it free. A small black data chip, no larger than a thumbprint, sealed inside a waterproof slip. "Well," Caleb murmured, "that's not standard issue." He placed it into a small evidence bag and zipped it shut, mind already buzzing. He knew a guy. Across town, behind the community center, the school gym doubled as a temporary winter rec space for the town's youth, a place for indoor soccer, crafts, and the occasional safety seminar. That morning, Caleb had agreed to lead a K-9 demo session for local kids as part of the sheriff department's outreach. Ghost would be the star. The crowd was modest. Maybe a dozen kids and a few parents. Among them was Tommy Greer, a wiry 11-year-old with a mop of shaggy red hair and mismatched gloves. Tommy had a habit of testing limits, as his overworked single mom described it. He was smart, sharp-tongued, and absolutely unafraid of breaking rules if it meant getting attention. As Caleb gave the crowd a rundown on K-9 behavior, obedience, and scent detection, Tommy crept toward the far corner of the gym, where old floodlights and unused extension cords were stored on tall industrial racks. One cord trailed loosely across the floor, plugged in near a faulty wall socket. Ghost was in the middle of a search demonstration when his ears suddenly perked. His body went rigid. Then, without a bark, he trotted swiftly away from the center mat, ignoring Caleb's hand signal, and moved directly toward Tommy. "Ghost!" Caleb called, eyebrows furrowing. But Ghost didn't stop. He reached Tommy just as the boy reached for a loose cord looped around a cracked outlet box. With unexpected gentleness, Ghost pressed his head against Tommy's hip, pushing him back from the socket with a firm, controlled nudge. Startled, Tommy stumbled away. A split second later, the loose plug sparked just once before going dark. Silence fell. One of the parents gasped. Another started clapping. Caleb stepped over, knelt beside Ghost, and rubbed his shoulder with a tight grin. "Good boy," he whispered. Tommy looked stunned, then sheepish. He knew it was dangerous?" Caleb nodded. "That's why we call him Ghost. He sees what the rest of us miss." Back at the station, the data chip lay on Caleb's desk beneath a protective cloth. He'd already contacted someone he trusted to help extract whatever information it held. Wes Delgado, a retired Army intel analyst who now taught computer sciences at the community college 2 towns over. Delgado had once cracked a stolen drone telemetry file that led to the arrest of 2 domestic smugglers. He didn't ask questions. He just made code talk. As if on cue, Delgado knocked once on the glass before letting himself in. He was in his early 50s, heavy-set, with wire-rim glasses and a flannel shirt tucked into jeans that sagged over well-worn boots. His grizzled beard gave him the air of a man who had once kept secrets for a living and now brewed his own cider to forget them. "You said urgent?" he asked, lifting a brow. Caleb nodded, handing him the chip. "Found this hidden in a car that went into the lake. Owner claims memory loss. Nothing adds up." Delgado examined the chip, then pulled out a portable decryptor the size of a lunchbox from his messenger bag. He connected the device to Caleb's laptop and began the transfer. "Encrypted twice," he muttered. "Military grade. You can crack it?" "I've opened tougher ones in Syria." Caleb waited, arms folded, tapping his boot against the tile. Outside, snow had picked up again, cloaking the windows in quiet white. After 15 minutes, Delgado leaned back. "There. Partial success. It's fragments of a program code language I haven't seen in public use. But here's the kicker. A string in the metadata links to a DoD research subnetwork, something called Project Cerberus. Ring a bell?" Caleb shook his head slowly. "Should it?" Delgado smirked. "Only if you were at the Pentagon in the last 5 years. Whatever it is, someone didn't want this floating around." Caleb looked down at the chip, then back at Delgado. "Can you make a copy and keep quiet?" "I'll treat it like a kidney transplant." That evening, as darkness curled back over Northwood, Caleb returned to the small guest room he'd set up for Amelia in the upper level of the station. She was sitting on the windowsill, wrapped in a blanket, watching the falling snow with a distant expression. Ghost lay curled at her feet, tail flicking slowly. "You found something," she said, without turning. Caleb paused at the doorway. "I did, hidden in your car, a chip." Amelia turned to face him. Her voice dropped. "You shouldn't have looked." "I had to. You nearly died. Someone meant for you to disappear." Her eyes glinted not with anger but resignation. "And now you're involved." Caleb met her gaze steadily. "Maybe I already was?" She looked down at Ghost. "He knew I had it, didn't he?" Caleb nodded. "He didn't just find you. He found your secret." There was a long silence between them. Then she said, almost to herself, "I didn't want to carry it anymore." Outside, the wind howled against the eaves, but inside the room, Ghost gave a soft, settling sigh, his presence a calm in the storm that was slowly, inevitably gathering. The morning in Northwood came slow, fogged and pale like breath against glass. Snowfall had paused overnight, but the wind still rattled through pine limbs and gutter spouts, whispering the secrets of a town too quiet for its own good. The sheriff's station creaked gently as it settled against the cold, and inside, coffee brewed in a chipped metal pot that hissed like it resented being awake. Caleb Dawson sat at his desk, hair damp from the morning shower, jacket unzipped, the badge on his chest reflecting the weak light bleeding through frosted windows. Before him was a single folder thin, brown, and marked Classified Inquiry, Internal. The papers inside were already known to him by heart, but he read them again anyway. Amelia Grant, former defense contractor, Department of Structural Integrity. Project name, Aegis Skies. The report had been quietly buried under layers of legal jargon, but Wes Delgado's decrypted metadata had led to a back-channel memo Caleb had requested through his old academy contact, now working low in the DOJ. Amelia had filed a whistleblower report against her employer Ordinex Dynamics, a private defense firm contracted to produce next-gen drone chassis for military deployment. Her claim. The core carbon composite used in drone construction was prone to high heat collapse under battlefield conditions, a flaw that could render thousands of units airborne coffins. Her evidence had been rejected, flagged as inconclusive, and Amelia was terminated under accusations of data tampering. 3 months later, the engineer who had seconded her findings was found dead in what was ruled a single-car accident. That was the last time Amelia Grant was seen in public until the lake. Caleb leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. The threads were there. They just hadn't been stitched into a noose yet. Footsteps echoed down the stairs. He turned to see Amelia appear in the station's side hallway, dressed in borrowed thermal leggings and a gray wool sweater a size too big. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a loose braid, still damp from the shower. Her expression was calmer today, though the heaviness in her eyes remained. "Good morning," she said, voice still a bit hoarse. "Ghosts waiting for you," Caleb replied, nodding toward the door. Amelia glanced that way, and a small smile touched the corner of her lips. "He always is." They had started walking each morning after the second night. It wasn't planned, just a mutual escape from the silence of walls and suspicion. Caleb sometimes joined, sometimes didn't, but Ghost never missed a step. This morning, Ghost was already waiting by the side entrance, tail flicking once as Amelia pulled on gloves and stepped into the snow-packed lot. He trotted beside her, ears up, gaze alert, but body relaxed. They walked past the town library, still closed for the morning, then down toward the old rail trail, now layered in powder. Amelia moved slowly at first, then steadier. Ghost kept her pace. "I had a dog once," she said after a while. Her voice was quiet, casual, but the kind of quiet that trembled if poked too hard. Ghost tilted his head slightly as if listening. He was a mutt, border collie and something else wolf maybe, jet black, smart like he could read my mind. Name was Toby. Amelia paused. "I lost him when I moved east. My ex, well, we didn't agree on what counted as home. Toby stayed with my neighbor. He died 2 years ago." She looked down at Ghost. "But something about you. It's like he's walking beside me again." Ghost didn't respond, of course. He just trotted a little closer, brushing her leg as if affirming the connection. Later that day, Caleb stopped at a small gas station on the edge of town to fill the cruiser. Ghost, as always, rode in the back. Amelia remained at the station. Snow was falling again light this time, more ornamental than ominous. The attendant behind the counter was Benny Cruz, a kid barely 20 with a buzz cut and permanent smudge of grease on his cheek. His cousin owned the station, and Benny was known more for his anime tattoos than for customer service. But he nodded when he saw Caleb. "All good, officer?" "Smooth morning so far." Caleb grabbed a bottle of water, tossed a few bucks on the counter. Ghost let out a low whine from the back seat. Then again, a sharper whine. Caleb turned, immediately alert. Ghost was staring at the tree line behind the station, ears forward, body rigid. Then, suddenly, he let out a bark, loud, fast, not his usual low growl. Then another. Caleb spun toward the woods just in time to see a dark figure dart between the trees. Medium build, winter jacket, hood up. Moving fast, too fast. Caleb dropped the bottle, pulled his radio. "Unit 31, possible suspect on foot, rear of Benny's gas. Requesting backup." He opened the back door. "Ghost, track." The German Shepherd leapt out, all muscle and velocity. Caleb followed, boots tearing through snow as they plunged into the woods. The man ahead slipped once but didn't fall. He was moving with purpose, not panic, like someone with an exit plan. Ghost closed the gap in seconds. The man twisted mid-run and tossed something metallic, small. It caught the sunlight and disappeared into the snow. Ghost surged forward and snapped his jaws, catching the man's coat just above the thigh. The stranger yelped, fell, and Caleb caught up 2 heartbeats later. He cuffed the man, breath heaving. "You're not from around here." The man said nothing, just stared at Ghost with a kind of loathing that felt personal. Back at the station, the man refused to speak. No ID. Burned fingerprints. Fake plates on his truck. But the object he'd thrown, recovered by Ghost, was a flash drive. Encrypted. Again. Later that night, Caleb showed it to Amelia. Her face went pale. "I've seen that casing before. It's a standard issue. Ordinex security intel. Level 7 access. So, someone tracked you here. I think they were already here." Northwood was cloaked in stillness that night, a hush that settled over the town like a warning. Snow no longer fell, but the cold remained sharp and biting, sinking into porch railings and frostbitten mailboxes. The station was dimly lit, most staff already home, and the hum of the fluorescent hallway lights offered the only sound beyond Caleb's footsteps. Amelia sat in the conference room, her face pale under the sterile lighting. Her arms were crossed tightly, as if trying to hold herself together. Ghost lay a few feet away, not sleeping, not pacing, just waiting, his eyes flicking between them. The flash drive they had retrieved from the man in the woods now rested in the center of the table like a loaded weapon, untouched but heavy. Wes Delgado had come in person again, summoned by an urgent call. He now hunched over his portable decryptor, gray hair askew, his eyes narrowed behind his glasses. A cup of vending machine coffee steamed nearby, untouched. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, his jaw tight, arms crossed over his chest. His uniform still smelled faintly of pine and sweat, his mind running through every worst-case scenario. After nearly an hour, Delgado sat back with a slow exhale. "It's a deep-layer encryption," he muttered, "but not locked completely, just waiting to be seen." "What does that mean?" Caleb asked. "It means," Delgado said, swiveling the laptop to face them, "this drive wasn't meant to store information. It was meant to carry it secretly buried in code strings that look like static. On the screen appeared rows of complex characters, but scattered among them, highlighted in yellow, were familiar names. Government names. 5 of them. 3 from Department of Defense, 1 from a private aerospace regulatory board, and 1 from Ordinex's internal security team director, Vincent Kale. Amelia's hand moved to her collar instinctively. "That name," she whispered. "He threatened me once, said if I didn't retract the whistleblower claim, he'd erase my access to air. I thought it was metaphorical." Delgado didn't blink. "I'd say he meant it." But then the screen flickered. Then again, lines of code began distorting into error strings. Caleb stepped forward, heart thumping. "What's happening?" "Someone's trying to wipe it remotely." Delgado slammed the laptop shut, yanking the drive. It was being monitored. That's when the station lights cut out. Not all of them, just the network servers. The backup generator kicked in immediately, but the internal system Caleb used for secure federal communications went dark. The screen read, "Access denied. System compromised." Then a second message flashed briefly. "Agent Dawson. System access revoked. Suspension in effect." Caleb stared. They moved fast. Amelia's face went pale. "They're inside the government," Delgado grunted. "Or they bought someone who is." Caleb knew what came next. The protocol was clear. He was to report in, surrender his badge, and step down pending investigation of breach. No appeal, no questions. But Caleb wasn't the kind of man to fold when the mission turned black. That night, after clearing his personal locker and transferring his files to an encrypted thumb drive of his own, he took Ghost and left the station quietly, without ceremony. Delgado promised to monitor the drive manually, off-grid, with no cloud trace. Amelia stayed behind in the guest room, for now safer in the shadows of a quiet town than on the road. Caleb didn't want to bring the dog home, not with his systems watched and phone lines likely tapped, so he drove Ghost to the only place in town he trusted beyond the badge, the Northwood Community Center. It was past midnight. The rec hall was dark, the main floor cleared from earlier Zumba sessions and after-school programs. Mrs. Evelyn Carr, the part-time janitor, had left the side door open as requested. She was in her 70s, short and round with a habit of humming gospel songs to herself when she swept. She adored Ghost ever since he once stopped a teen from setting off fireworks inside the restroom. "You boys be safe tonight," she had said, pressing a small paper bag of peanut butter cookies into Caleb's hand. "You ever need heat, you come here." Caleb nodded and laid out a sleeping mat for Ghost in one corner, just behind the stage curtains where it was quietest. That's when he heard soft footsteps. He turned, hand instinctively near his belt, then froze. A girl stood at the hallway's edge. She couldn't have been more than 8. Thin, small-shouldered, with frizzy brown curls tied in a loose, lopsided ponytail. Her oversized coat hung awkwardly on her, sleeves flopping over her fingers. Her sneakers were taped together at the toes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I heard there was a dog," she said quietly. Caleb softened. "There is. He's resting. You shouldn't be here, sweetie. Where are your parents?" She looked down. "Foster house. I snuck out. It's loud there, always yelling." He nodded slowly, kneeling to her level. "What's your name?" "Maisie." "Maisie," he said gently. "Ghost is very tired, but he's good with people who are kind. Would you like to say hi?" She nodded, eyes wide. He motioned her forward. Ghost lifted his head as she approached. Normally, he would bristle at strangers at night, especially children, but something in his body language was different. His tail tapped once. Then he rose and walked slowly to Maisie, nose lowered. She reached out her small hand. Ghost didn't sniff. He didn't resist. He gently rested his head against her ribs. Maisie smiled. "You're not loud," she whispered into his fur. Caleb stood, heart unexpectedly tight. The girl stayed for a few minutes, sitting cross-legged beside Ghost. When Evelyn Carr returned to lock up, she led Maisie out gently, promising to walk her back to the house herself. That night, Caleb watched Ghost sleep beside the heater vent, tail curled against his body, the outline of his form blurred by shadows and streetlight spill. He wasn't just a police dog anymore. He was the one thing left in this town that still listened without judgment. Northwood lay under a deep frost that morning, the kind that clung to rooftops like lace and coated tree limbs in brittle silver. The sky was a hard, unbroken white, and even the pines stood hushed as if they sensed something moving beneath the stillness. Beneath it all was a quiet tension, unspoken, but waiting to crack open like lake ice under pressure. Caleb Dawson stood beside his truck, breath fogging in the air, eyes sweeping the trailhead beyond the tree line. He wasn't in uniform. He hadn't worn the badge since his suspension. But that didn't mean he wasn't a cop anymore. Some roles don't strip off with a patch. They bury into the spine. Amelia had stayed inside the station's auxiliary office temporarily repurposed as a safe room, while Wes Delgado continued combing through the fragments of the flash drive. Amelia had barely slept. Her face was drawn, pale against the backdrop of the gray wool sweater, but her voice had grown more grounded in the past day, like the secrets had stopped controlling her breath. Ghost sat at Caleb's heel, tail still, body rigid with alert. His ears twitched, eyes fixed on the dense timber ahead. There was no visible threat. Not yet. But Ghost sensed something. And that was enough. Inside the station, Sarah Lynn was checking the perimeter cameras. She had returned without asking for permission after hearing of Caleb's suspension. She was in a dark olive utility jacket over a black turtleneck, her short-cropped salt-and-pepper hair tucked under a knit cap. Sharp-eyed and quiet as ever, Sarah's expression carried the same clipped edge she wore in the Denver unit, a woman shaped by loss and sharpened by it. After losing her partner in an ambush 5 years ago, she had no tolerance for incompetence or injustice. She was one of the few who never doubted Caleb when he said something wasn't right. "Someone's coming," she said flatly, eyes on the feed. Southridge camera just caught a shadow moving fast. Caleb's phone buzzed. No caller ID. He answered. A voice spoke through static. You should have stayed down. We warned her. You don't get a second warning. Then silence. Caleb's jaw locked. He looked to Ghost, who had already risen, muscles rippling under the thick K9 vest. His head turned sharply toward the south. One bark. It was happening. Inside the safe room, Amelia sat by the narrow window. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. She felt it before the sound, an instinct, a wrongness. Then came the crunch of boots over snow. A figure moved through the trees, fast and low, dressed in black, holding something close to the body. Amelia didn't scream. She ducked and reached for the panic button beneath the desk. The power cut instantly. Darkness. Then came the sound of a window shattering in the hallway. Caleb burst through the rear station entrance just as Ghost launched forward. The assassin had already slipped in, face-masked, movement surgical. He moved like someone trained in close-quarters work, sweeping the hallway with a compact, silenced pistol. But he hadn't accounted for a dog like Ghost. Ghost slammed into him mid-turn, knocking the man sideways into a filing cabinet. The pistol skidded across the floor. The man tried to scramble to his feet, pulling a blade, but Ghost struck again, this time biting the forearm hard enough to draw a muffled scream. The man pushed off and ran. Ghost chased. Caleb followed. They tore through the rear exit and into the forest trail. The snow made the terrain treacherous, but Ghost moved like wind fluid, deadly. The man was fast, zigzagging between trees, but Ghost herded him instinctively, steering him left, then cutting him off on the right. The man stumbled near the frozen creek, where the ground sloped downward toward a shallow gully ringed with ice. Ghost leapt and cornered him against the rocks, his body braced low, a warning growl rumbling from his chest. Caleb arrived seconds later, weapon drawn. "On your knees." The man hesitated, then dropped the knife. Caleb cuffed him and yanked the mask off. The face was forgettable. Mid-30s, pale, close-shaved head, scar along the neck, but the eyes were dead flat. Trained, hired, no trace of fear, only silence. "Who sent you?" Caleb demanded. The man said nothing. Ghost barked once, loud and sharp, standing beside him like a living warning. The man flinched. "I'm guessing it's someone who doesn't like sunlight," Caleb muttered. "Too bad. I've got friends with flashlights." Back at the station, the EMTs patched the attacker's wound. Federal agents were called. Delgado took the drive and disappeared into a secured channel. But what stuck with Caleb wasn't the fight. It was what happened after. Ghost limped, only slightly, favoring his front right paw. Caleb noticed as soon as they returned his partner's gait shifting subtly. "You're hurt," he murmured, kneeling to inspect. Ghost didn't whine, didn't resist. But there was a small gash just below the shoulder, probably from the assailant's blade when they grappled. Amelia stepped forward. "Let me help." Caleb looked up. She was already pulling on gloves, her hands trembling only slightly. Her eyes held the same kind of focus he'd seen in field medics and engineers on the verge of breakthrough. She knelt beside Ghost and began cleaning the wound gently. He didn't move, just watched her, golden eyes calm and steady. "I know this isn't your job," she said to Ghost softly, "but thank you." Ghost lowered his head into her lap. It wasn't obedience, it was choice. Caleb watched them, silent. No one said it aloud, but something had shifted. They weren't just handler and dog, or rescuer and witness. They were something else now. 3 broken lines converging into one. A man without a badge, a woman without a name, and a dog who refused to let either disappear. The snow had begun to melt. Slowly, like the town was exhaling after holding its breath too long. Icy eaves dripped into shallow puddles, and sunlight flickered through pine branches in golden slivers that hadn't been seen in weeks. Northwood, quiet and cradled in its mountain valley, looked unchanged to passing eyes. But within its station walls and narrow streets, something had shifted, something deeper than weather. Caleb Dawson stood in the back room of the sheriff's station, staring at a windbreaker tossed over the evidence table. It belonged to the man they had caught 2 days prior. Black, matte, military grade, the kind used by private contractors who worked off books and off maps. The man still hadn't spoken, refusing food and even eye contact, but his jacket had. Ghost, ever observant, had returned to the evidence room that morning and planted himself beside the coat without moving. He sniffed, circled once, then sat down with a low whine. Caleb, sensing the dog's unease, had checked the inner lining again, and there, just behind a hidden seam in the breast pocket, was a small digital voice recorder, no bigger than a car key. Now, hours later, Caleb pressed play. The voice that filled the room was clear, crisp male, authoritative, cold. Verify elimination of the witness before the 19th. Data sweep complete. Dawson is a variable. Handle, if necessary, no connections left. Ordinex has cleared internal logs. Then static. Then silence. Amelia, standing behind him, went still. Her face, already pale, turned paper white. "That voice," she whispered. "That's Vincent Cale." "Your director?" Caleb asked. She nodded. He never left voice trails. He was known for that. He used intermediaries, messengers. But that's him. I'd swear it in front of a jury. You just might. The next move wasn't through a courthouse. It was through Channel 7, the local news station based 20 miles away in Red Hollow. Caleb drove out with Wes Delgado beside him, and Ghost curled in the back seat, watching the trees roll by with quiet vigilance. Marla Jennings, Channel 7's senior anchor and field reporter, was waiting when they arrived. Marla was in her late 40s, tall and lean, with short auburn hair and a blazer that looked like it hadn't seen a wrinkle since the Obama administration. She was sharp, once a regional correspondent in D.C., until a story she refused to bury cost her a national contract. She moved to Red Hollow 5 years ago and built a reputation on integrity no one could buy off. "You're bringing me fire, Caleb," she said as he handed her a copy of the file. "If this is real..." "It is." She studied the transcript. "You understand the risk. I'm already suspended. They've already come for her. It's not about risk anymore. It's about daylight." She glanced toward Ghost, who sat by the studio door, alert and calm. "That one's got better instincts than most people I know." Caleb smiled slightly. "That's not instinct. That's conviction." Within 24 hours, Marla's story aired. It didn't name Caleb directly, but referenced internal recordings, a whistleblower from Ordinex, and an unnamed former government analyst who confirmed the encryption was legitimate. It ended with a chilling voice clip. Cale's words echoed through the broadcast like a ghost too loud to ignore. The piece went viral by morning. Back in Northwood, the mayor's office called in an emergency town hall. While the federal investigation kicked into gear and subpoenas whispered through the fog of power, the people of Northwood had something else in mind: gratitude. 2 days later, in front of the town library, a small but heartfelt ceremony was held. Mayor Calvin Turner stood at the makeshift podium, a man in his 60s with thick glasses and a voice that always cracked when he got emotional. A former high school civics teacher, Turner believed more in people than politics, which was exactly why he'd stayed in Northwood instead of climbing elsewhere. "We gathered today," he began, holding a velvet box, "not just to thank a brave officer, but to honor someone whose silence speaks louder than most men's promises." Ghost stood in front of the crowd, his coat brushed, his vest polished. Caleb knelt beside him, hand on his back, while children from the local elementary school held handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Ghost," and "Our hero has 4 paws." The crowd chuckled as Turner opened the box and revealed a custom-forged medal, round and silver, engraved with "Guardian of Northwood. Loyalty beyond words." Caleb reached for Ghost's collar, but Ghost didn't stay. He turned. Without prompt or hesitation, he walked away from Caleb and toward the crowd. Then, softly, Ghost stopped in front of Amelia, who stood near the front row with her coat tight against the wind. Her eyes welled as the dog sat at her feet, then slowly leaned into her side. The crowd fell quiet. The gesture didn't need explanation. In that moment, Ghost acknowledged her not as cargo, not as witness or victim, but as family, as someone who, like him, had endured without retreat. Caleb watched with a quiet smile, pride and something deeper stirring in his chest, and the town applauded. As the crowd dispersed and children swarmed around Ghost for handshakes and tail wags, Caleb stepped aside to answer his buzzing phone. "Dawson," he said. The voice on the other end was steady. Clipped Special Agent Marta Reyes, early 40s, lead investigator from the FBI's Public Integrity Task Force. She was known for her bluntness, dark suits, and an almost eerie ability to stay calm under pressure. Caleb had met her once during a regional training summit. She had a steel gaze and a memory like a bear trap. "It's done," she said. "Kyle is in custody. We caught him boarding a private flight out of Flagstaff using forged diplomatic clearance. We've got 2 Ordnex executives already turning state's witness, and the chain of approvals tied to Project Aegis is unraveling." Caleb closed his eyes. Relief didn't hit like a wave. It came slow, quiet like the thaw that came before spring. "And the man we caught? Black market contractor. Real name's Leonard Spence. He's been used in 4 other silencing jobs. He's talking now." Caleb opened his eyes again, looking out at Ghost still nestled at Amelia's side. "Thanks for calling." Reyes paused. "You did good, Dawson. Suspension's going to be reviewed, and unofficially, we owe you one." He hung up, sliding the phone into his pocket. The darkness had cracked, and this time it was the truth that stepped forward first. Spring returned to Northwood the way it always did, quietly, as if unsure it was welcome after so long beneath frost. The river, once frozen solid, now ran free under bridges and over stone beds, whispering its thaw like an old friend come back from war. Yellow wildflowers dared to bloom along the hillsides, and children's laughter returned to the sidewalks, as though the town itself was learning how to breathe again. The old firehouse at the edge of town had been renovated, its windows scrubbed clean, its garage converted into a hybrid learning lab. A new banner hung proudly above the wide double doors. Safe Circuits Initiative, engineering with ethics, heart, and hands. Inside, beneath the warm glow of LED fixtures and the faint hum of soldering tools, a group of teenagers gathered around a long workbench. Their faces were diverse, some shy, some scarred by experience, but all focused on the task before them. Among the scattered blueprints and microchips, one presence stood out. Ghost. Now 8 years old, the German Shepherd remained a quiet sentinel. His fur, once black and mahogany, had silvered slightly around the muzzle. His golden eyes still held the same depth part soldier, part sage. He padded between students without a sound, tail swaying gently. Where some saw a dog, these kids saw something else, a symbol of stillness, of patience, of what came after survival. Amelia Grant, standing near the front table, wore jeans and a navy work shirt with the Safe Circuits logo stitched over the breast. Her hair was shorter now, shoulder length and purposeful, but her gaze was stronger, rooted. A year had passed since the storm, and while the scars still existed, they no longer dictated who she was. She now co-led the initiative with the town's school board, teaching ethics in engineering, whistleblower protection, and responsible design. Her voice was soft but unwavering, the kind of voice that invited honesty, not through force, but through presence. One student stood apart from the others, a boy of 15, lanky with close-cropped hair and a hoodie that looked one size too big. His name was Riley Knox, and he had once been caught spray-painting obscenities on town hall doors, lighting firecrackers under cars for fun. Raised in a broken home with no clear rules and even fewer boundaries, Riley had been a name often muttered by frustrated officers in Northwood. But then, last fall, he'd been assigned mandatory community service at Safe Circuits. On the second day, he'd tried to kick over a box of old wires in protest. Ghost had simply walked up, sat in front of him, and stared. No bark, no growl, just stillness. And Riley had stopped. He hadn't broken anything since. Now, the boy sat beside Ghost, measuring circuits and asking real questions about heat conductivity. At the edge of the room, the garage door creaked open. Caleb Dawson stepped inside, freshly shaven, back in uniform dark navy with his reinstated badge gleaming under the light. He had been quietly reinstated 6 months ago, but today was special. Today, he wasn't here as an officer. He was here as someone who had fought for the truth and lived to see its shape. Sarah Lynn walked in behind him, holding 2 boxes of takeout. She had finally retired 3 months ago, claiming she was too tired to read people who lie for a living. But her sarcasm was intact, and she still mentored cadets part-time. She handed Caleb a coffee, then stepped aside to give the floor. Caleb nodded at the teens, then at Amelia, then finally at Ghost, who sat up straight as if sensing ceremony in the air. "Thank you all for being here today," Caleb began. His voice was steady, casual. "1 year ago, we were standing in snowdrifts so deep you couldn't find the sidewalk. 1 year ago, this building was boarded up, Ghost was dodging bullets, and I was technically unemployed." A chuckle rippled across the room. He continued, glancing toward Riley. "Some of you probably thought you'd never be in a room like this, surrounded by people who believed you could be more than your worst moment." Then he looked to Ghost, his expression softening. "But healing doesn't happen alone. It takes time and patience, and sometimes it takes a dog who refuses to walk away." Ghost stood, padding over and sitting beside Caleb. "Ghost didn't just sniff out danger," Caleb said. "He sniffed out people, those worth saving, those hiding pain, those still learning how to trust again." He paused, scanning the room. "He doesn't just track crime, he tracks hope. A beat. And today, we honor him not for being perfect, but for being present, for being what so many of us needed when everything else fell apart." There was no medal this time, no TV crew, just the quiet rise of applause, sincere, lasting. Amelia moved to Caleb's side. "He taught us all something," she said. "That courage doesn't always bark. Sometimes it just stays." Caleb nodded, resting a hand gently on Ghost's head. Outside, the wind stirred through the trees again, this time warm, dancing past broken windows now replaced with glass. The town had changed, not dramatically, but meaningfully. It had let light into places long forgotten. Ghost lay down between the two of them, tail curling toward the boy at the bench, eyes half closed, at peace. "We don't get to choose where our story begins, but we do get to choose who walks beside us as it continues." For Ghost, it started with a frozen lake and a woman the world had tried to erase. But what followed was more than rescue. It was redemption. In the silence between bark and breath, he reconnected a broken town, rebuilt trust in a wounded heart, and reminded even the most guarded soul that loyalty never needs words. He didn't just find a new home, he became one, a place where people could return. A reminder that healing sometimes wears fur and walks on 4 steady paws. And maybe in your life, there's a ghost, too, a friend, a memory, a moment of stillness that reminds you you're not alone. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Drop a comment below and let us know your story. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so more stories like this can find their way home. May the God of all comfort bless you wherever you are, whatever you carry. You are not forgotten.